Good morning, and back to your weekly episode of the Union Podcast. I'm your co-host Curtis Valentine with my sister Carrie Rodriguez, and this is episode 14 of your weekly dose of news, politics, policy, polling, advocacy in K-12 education from the perspective of teachers and parents. It's an amazing time right now, Carrie. We have a guest today. I'm so glad to have her because guess what? I'm a Jersey native, born and raised. Exit 9 for those of you who don't know. Dad's from Rahway, mom's from Linden Roselle, born in Elizabeth. So you got a double dose of Jersey today, Carrie.
Well, and I got to say, we cannot move forward with this podcast without, of course, putting respect on Newark, New Jersey, because I work with Taft Shear Cosby, who is our senior director of partnership of organizing and partnerships, and she's a favorite daughter of New Jersey. It is also her birthday today.
Oh,
So
happy birthday.
happy birthday to Taft Shear, better known as my work wife. We are like peas and carrots. We share sweaters. We share a lot of our lives together as we try to organize parents and families across the country. So one of my absolute favorite people in the universe, and it's her birthday. So it's a Jersey themed podcast in her honor today. And there is a lot to talk about in New Jersey, a lot of stuff bubbling up, and we're going to get into it.
No, we're gonna get into it. But before we jump into Laura and work she's doing there, for those of you around the country, outside of the Beltway, we want to remind you the government is still in a shutdown, and so oftentimes people sort of forget. I think there was some polling recently that said only 6% of Americans even feel impacted by the shutdown, and 1/3 of Americans didn't even know we were in a shutdown. And so,
Well, not yet, because I'll tell you, October 15th is coming, and that is when folks are going to be missing their first paychecks, and there's gonna be some notice that is given, especially to military families, folks that live on Indian reservations across the country, and Native Americans. So we are going to start to feel the impact. In addition, when you start to see things happening with WIC, when you start to see things happening with SNAP, there's a whole host of things outside of the world of education that folks will start to feel. But we are kind of safe just in our little education bubble because that funding thankfully did go out on October 1st. We were a little bit worried about whether or not the formula funding was going to be making its second payment, but we did confirm with states across the nation, state chiefs saying that money did get out the door on October 1st. So who knows? We are in a chaos environment, friends, and we got to stay ready all the time because things are happening quickly.
No, you're right. I'm right here in the DC metro area, and for those who don't know, 87% of the Department of Education is on furlough, meaning they are not getting paid. And so those who are living in the Maryland area, Northern Virginia, DC area, who have children, families, sadly, some of them who are living check to check are going to be negatively impacted by that. At the same time, one of the most impacted communities, and you mentioned a little bit, Carrie, are those places around the country that benefit from something they call impact aid. So over 1,000 districts around the country are really being impacted by this impact aid, which is this sort of funding for tax exempt districts, including those on tribal land, but also military bases. And so those who are those that cannot generate their own local tax resources are ones that are most impacted by that. That aid, what does it cover? It covers teachers' salaries. It covers utilities for the districts that can't raise revenue. But here's a kicker, Carrie. While the government is shut down, student loan payments are still due. So they're still coming for their money. they're at 13% workforce, but they're still coming for their money. And so those of you out there, hold on. We're hoping that our leaders at the federal level can come to an agreement sooner than later so that we can get back to work of improving the lives of our children. But that being said, we have a special guest from Jersey, Garden State. Carrie, who do we have with us today? And let's get going.
We have our good friend Laura Waters, who is the founder and managing editor of New Jersey Education Report. And this lady, when it comes down to covering what's happening on the ground in New Jersey. She is literally the tip of the spear on covering stories. I mean, she's got a legendary background in journalism and has been covering these stories with a really critical eye towards holding people accountable and telling the truth. So Laura, there's a lot to talk about, including things that are happening in real time in New Jersey right now, but I'm just so thrilled. We've known each other for a real long time through Education Post, and you've just done some courageous and frankly heroic pieces that have really moved the needle and got people talking, and frankly held elected officials accountable for poor decision making, trying to cook the books, all kinds of things. So Laura, I want to first off, talking about New Jersey as a whole, could you give us a State of the Union? You're in the middle of a pretty contentious governor's race right now. Education has been part of the conversation there. So give us a little bit of the lay of the land.
Well, I mean, New Jersey is interesting from a lot of perspectives. One is that after being a really reliably blue state, it's shifted. There was a piece in the Atlantic saying it's a new swing state. And last year, Donald Trump lost by only 6 points, which was astonishing to a lot of people. And one of the levers for that, I think, is a growing recognition that we're not educating students in a way that is commensurate with how much money we spend, how wealthy many of our students are. Not all are by any means. You just mentioned Tafshir, who's from Newark, which is one of our districts with very high numbers of students who qualify for free lunch. So there's just a lot going on. There are so many elements that go into what's cooking right now, from really prolonged school closures to our current governor, who's serving a second term, Phil Murphy, who has made a lot of concessions to a fairly militant teachers union, despite our incredible teachers. And so there's much going on. And one of the groups I've been working with is a new group, 501c3, a nonprofit called Wake Up Call New Jersey, that has made it its mission to shine light on school districts where parents are under the impression that their kids are just fine as long as they can afford to buy a house in one of these districts. Just wait, it's gonna happen. And in fact, it's not. So the two districts that were just recently spotlighted are, you're not from New Jersey, so I guess it doesn't matter, but Montclair and West Windsor, Plainsboro.
Montclair and West Windsor. And Laura, hold on a second. I want to stop you for a minute, because what's very interesting for me from Massachusetts. Now, I'm going to also say that, like, National Parents Union, our folks on the ground in New Jersey, we are very interested and very involved in what Wake Up Call New Jersey is doing, because it is fantastic. And you can tell that it's impactful because it's making folks a little jiggly wiggly and nervous. And we're even hearing, we even got ourselves a little superintendent tantrum this week, which I was like, whew.
Indeed.
That's when you know your advocacy is working, when you have a superintendent who's firing off a 14-page response to us asking some questions and pointing some things out. But Laura, it's interesting because we're going to talk about Montclair and West Windsor. And I just want to set the stage with, if you're sitting here and you're saying, well, it's New Jersey and this is really inside politics, I can tell you, if you're watching us from Massachusetts, the communities we would bring to mind are Somerville and Cambridge or Arlington. These are these progressive enclaves, people who are generally higher income, the districts that skew predominantly white but progressive, and folks that I think are very well intended in thinking that they are supporting public education by simply not asking any questions. And so if you're sitting in another state right now, I want you to view this through the lens of understanding that this happens in every state. And there are communities just like Montclair and West Windsor. So keep your ears peeled, because you're going going to see exactly the same behavior. But I interrupted you, Laura. Get into it.
No. One thing to know about New Jersey, which makes it a little different, is that we have in a tiny, really relatively small state, we have 590 school districts. So that's more school districts per square mile than any other state in the country. So and that's because we have this addiction to local control, which empowers elected officials, and they're loath to give it up. And that interferes with the ability of the state to create a system, a statewide system where districts are held accountable. You want to tell something to a school board, they're going to say, oh, no, that's not your business. So the other thing that happens with 590 school districts is you get into a district depending on how much money you can spend on a house. So in Montclair and West Windsor, the average house goes for between $900,000 and $1 million. So the only people who can get, so these are very wealthy. Not everyone. There's some affordable housing, but by and large, these are very wealthy communities that put much trust into their system. When you add to that,
trust and much taxes, you think about property values, $900,000 to $1 million bucks.
Carrie, that's
that means these districts are getting a lot of money.
Yeah, and the way our school funding system works is in these wealthy districts, almost about 60% of the cost of schools comes through local property taxes. So the average property tax bill in Montclair, I think, is close to $23,000. So they're paying for it. They must be getting their money's worth. But when you start digging into
Tell me about the outcomes. Tell me about with all that money.
So for all that money, you'd think you'd get all the kids proficient in reading and math and science. In fact, in Montclair, and this is according to data from the New Jersey Education Department based on state assessments, which Wake Up New Jersey has highlighted. In Montclair, 38% of fourth graders are not proficient in math. It's similar for reading. And these numbers, below 4, it's basically 2 out of 3 kids in these schools are not proficient. They are not able they don't have the tools they need to be successful as they go on through school. But parents don't know this for a variety of reasons. First of all, the grade inflation. I think 80% of grades are A's and B's, something like that. So the parents are not getting the information, and so they just trust. And it's great to trust. You love your child's teacher, you love the culture they create in the classroom, but when it comes down to it, what are the kids actually learning? And that's where New Jersey and many other states, as you pointed out, Carrie, this is where many states are falling short. We're just not being honest with parents.
I wanted to bring something up, and something that I think all three of us have in common. So Laura, you're in New Jersey. I'm in Maryland. Carrie, you're in Massachusetts. So many people outside of these states look at these states as a whole, look at outcomes and say, wow, this is a great place to live. They're the top 3, adding Connecticut, top 4 districts in the country. But if you look behind the numbers, and this is the point that you're making, Laura, when I first started doing education advocacy years ago, I looked at Maryland. We were number 1 in the country. Ed Week had us for, 5 years in a row. But at the same time, we had the largest racial achievement gap in the country.
Right.
And the second largest income gap in the country, second only to where? Massachusetts. And so it's this idea that you have these sort of, rising tide of the high income folks, sort of bringing the district up, but it masks a lot of things. I'm from New Jersey, went to a Franklin High School, which is a township district, a one high school district with a school
that's
board
really common here.
With one high school. But to your point, Laura, and I'll throw it back to you, this idea that because you have 60% of the funding come from, local generated taxes, you are doing what you're doing is sort of reinforcing a lot of the history that many people couldn't move into these communities, Carrie, that were sort of, whether it be redlined or
Absolutely.
housing covenants and things like that. And so you grandfather people into this. And so if you grow up in towns, and I can name a bunch, I don't want to name them all, that I know and that are still to this day, about my gray hair, I've been out of school for a little bit, haven't changed very much, Carrie, because of the 500, close to 600 districts. Same thing in Pennsylvania. A lot of these places have these large states and small states with multiple districts, really masking achievement gaps, but also reinforcing historical inequities, Laura.
Yes, and it's become politically necessary for some leaders to assert, as Governor Phil Murphy does often, we have the #1 school system in the country. That comes, you hear that all the time, and it infuriates me because we're being so dishonest about our achievement gaps, about student proficiency levels, about it's like the emperor has no clothes. We make believe the emperor's walking along the street.
Yeah, the best district in the country. For who, Carrie? Who is it good for?
We wrote an entire report with Ed Trust called #1 for Some, because here in Massachusetts, when I got into this work, we were 47th in the nation for educating or providing literacy for Latino little boys. Like, I don't, it drives me crazy to see blue state governors bragging about their education system. And now here in Massachusetts, we're doing stuff like we're not even going to assess it, folks. We're just going to throw the MCAS out. We could talk about that another day. But we got to get into the fact that when you start to hold people accountable, especially governors who love to crow about this stuff, superintendents saying there's nothing to see here, school boards saying, oh, no, like we just got our niche score, whatever that is, that tells us we're doing a great job. We're #2 in New Jersey. The numbers about proficiency are what they are. And boy, Laura, folks get a little bit upset when you start holding up those numbers and saying exactly what you just said. Parents, we got to start paying attention here, because this #1 ranking, when you look under the hood, the details are really pretty horrific. And the fact is, this is not a victimless crime. You know, when we are lying to parents, when we are inflating grades, when we are pushing kids through and handing them a meaningless diploma that doesn't mean proficiency, doesn't mean you're ready for college. It's parents and families that have to pay for 2 years of remedial courses before you can take a college level course. Like, that's real money. That's real time. That's what you're robbing kids of right now. And we're lying to them. And I think that's what has New Jersey a little shook up about this Wake Up Call New Jersey right now, because we're getting real about the numbers. People are finding out that there's a lot more to this story.
Yes. And with Wake Up Call, their strategy is to really enlighten parents so that then parents become the advocates in their own communities for going to school board meetings and saying, I was on a school board for 12 years, so I know how this works. We're going to talk, we're going to spend, 2.5 hours of a 3-hour meeting, showing off the artwork, and which is wonderful, of course, and it makes everyone feel good. But we're not going to spend a second talking about what are our goals for our kids academically. How much progress have we made? Let's look at our interim assessments and see, are our kids really growing at the rate we want them to? It's largely ignored. It becomes kind of a dog and pony show. And so what Wake Up Call hopes to do is to get parents to go to these board meetings and say, can you please answer these basic questions about our student learning? Can you please on report cards not just give us an inflated grade, but show us how our students are performing on these formative assessments, whether the different kinds they use. Can you line it up with the state standardized tests, which are the most important tool for accountability, even though they've lowered standards a bit. So if parents can start doing that in their own districts, then we can start seeing real progress. And that will happen.
we have heard, and actually we have Taff Shear, we have Megan, we have Kathy, some of our top organizing team in New Jersey right now having conversations. We've got information sessions scheduled for Tuesday. There's a school board meeting coming up in Montclair on Wednesday. Thursday, there is a curriculum meeting in West Windsor that they're not letting parents in the public into, but we're going to be right outside, because this data and the fact that Wake Up Call New Jersey is getting folks to wake up is sending a shockwave through these communities where they're starting to ask some deeper questions, and parents are coming out and saying, hold on a second. The data is what it is. We need to go into these meetings and start asking these questions. And I got to tell you, my team's reporting back and telling me that there's a lot of energy. There are a lot of questions. A lot of questions about, even talking about Montclair, like there's an obvious issue of transparency right now. They have a $20 million deficit. So parents know they've been lied to on the fiscal side of the house. Academic outcomes, they're not hearing the truth, and they're kind of saying, oh my gosh, now we're getting this information directly from Wake Up Call New Jersey saying this is a 5-alarm fire. Like, I don't know, Laura. I think you can only fool parents for so long. We're getting real heat on the ground with folks waking up.
I'm so glad to hear that, because parents are the smartest people about their own kids, and they know. And I think there may be, some anger. I know I have 4 kids. I know that when there have been times when I found out that the school wasn't being honest with me, it would make me really angry. I felt lied to. And I think parents are going to start feeling that too. Especially in these very progressive communities. Every house in Montclair and West Windsor probably, I don't know for sure, has a sign, hate has no home here, and all the lovely sentiments. But when you start digging in, we're really not serving the kids in the community. And put aside the majority of wealthy white and Asian families, there are kids of color in these communities too. And the achievement gaps, I just was looking at some of them, they're not just gaps, they're Grand Canyons.
Laura, I feel like we're almost bringing parents, it's through like the stages of grief in Montclair and in West Windsor, because these are really smart, really progressive folks. Yes. They're not dumb. These are like college educated folks that have really good jobs so that they can buy those $900,000 $1 million houses. Like you gotta have a brain in your head if you're earning at that level that you can buy a house, right? And you want to trust that, you're sending your child. The reason you bought a house here, like you said, is because of the great education. And when you find out, wait, hold on a second. Like, it may feel good walking into a building, and we've got these new buildings and they look great and they've got manicured lawns, but what's happening there is not getting kids to proficiency. Folks get real defensive and upset, and then they feel sad and violated and anxious and fearful. And we don't want to leave parents there. There are ways that we can fix this. We can organize. We can ask these questions. We can start getting transparency. We can start saying, hey, like we can be a part of the solution. Like we know more parents using the parent portal so that they're equipped with how their kid is doing and understanding iReady tests and all this information that's coming home. And then going to the board and saying, okay, if what we're investing in right now is not moving the needle, we've got to do better and make sure all this money we're investing is actually going to improve student outcomes, and maybe it's high impact tutoring or whatever they need. But we can't stay stuck, and we can't stay blind to this, because we're not doing our children a justice here.
That's right, Carrie. I think, in the end, it's really about those who've been put into leadership positions that need to be held accountable. I saw, Laura, you were on your school board for 12 years. I was on the school board here in Maryland for 10 years. And so it's really about parents fighting for their children, but those who are put in charge of the district and holding the superintendent accountable to be the ones that are actually holding him or her accountable, and along with parents. And so we're wrapping up this segment, Laura. So what's your message particularly to school board members in these districts about why they should work with parents and what the benefit is to them as officials when they're working directly with parents as opposed to working against them?
I think that if the message is not just highlighting low proficiency among students or achievement gaps. I think that what also people need to know, whether they're on the school board or whether they're a parent or whether they're administration, is that this is not brain surgery. We can do better. And there's some very simple things, like, for instance, what would happen if a school district committed to spending 45 minutes during their monthly public meeting, talking about student outcomes, looking at maybe, every month they look at a different grade or a different subject. What if there was a real clear, open, honest focus on looking at the numbers? And of course, kids can't be reduced to a number, but all districts have, as you mentioned, iReady or MAP tests where they're able to look at the students' growth. What if they did that? Or what if there was districts decided to reformat their report cards so that, yes, the teacher gave a grade, but the parents also knew what goes into that grade. Is it attendance only? Is it effort? Is it quizzes? What is it? Plus, what if they were able to automate it so that the parents could actually see, both on the interim tests and on the final assessments, how their kids were stacking up against state average or against proficiency levels? These are not things that are hard to implement. These are basic tools that drive us towards accountability towards parents. And so it's not just saying, hey, look, you stink. This is what you can do to make it better.
Laura, we absolutely have to have you back. There's so much that happens in New Jersey. There's going to be a lot of fireworks, I think, around,
Yes.
holding up this mirror and Wake Up Call New Jersey as they do more and more work across the state. So we'd love to have you back. It was so great to talk with you today.
It was great to talk to you too. Thanks for having me.
And Curtis, I want to leave us with two things real quick as Laura leaves. Like these are conversations we have over and over and over again. Report cards are the most effective communication tool that we have with parents. Learning Heroes has had their study for 10 plus years. Every year it's the same thing from parents. Let's make this data that we get from Learning Heroes actionable. We need to change report cards so they tell parents the information we need them to know. And you need to know whether or not your kid is reading and doing math on grade level. Say it real plain. We're not education experts. You're not going to make us into education experts. Tell us the information you want us to know if you want us to help you do something about it. Like, that's it. And I love this idea about data, but how about setting some actual goals? Like, let's all agree that this is where we are. If it's 38% of kids are proficient in reading, that is the truth. Stop yelling at the thermometer. Start setting some goals on how we bring the fever down. Let's say 80% proficiency by 2035. Let's go in and let's set a goal. Let's do all hands on deck and let's start moving the needle for kids. I don't know, Curtis. I'm tired of hearing folks make excuses. The writing is on the wall.
What you said is what a lot of people, and myself and others who served in official positions, said when we first started, which is we need to get more information out to the people. Let's not hide information. Let's be transparent. Information is power. It makes people feel stronger, not weaker. If I'm not doing well, just let me know and let's work together on doing it. But don't, as my New Jersey grandma said, Laura, don't pee on my head and tell me it's raining. This is something that is incredible, and this is why our podcast is so important. That because we're going to give the information that some people don't want you to have, maybe you're too busy to sort of stop and refer to, but ones that we believe are incredibly important to give you and empower you with information to make the right decision when you call your elected official, when you make a decision. Incredibly important. We're almost done, but before we go, I want to recognize our legislative champion of the week. And again, for those of you who are out there watching, you have a legislative champion you want to share with us and saying, this is someone who's a school board member, a state representative, someone in Congress who you believe is really championing education. And I'm so glad to recognize my sister, Erica Mitchell, who even just this week was recognized by the Center for Strong Public Schools for her advocacy and her work as chairwoman of the Atlanta Public Schools Board of Education. And she's
Wow.
passed so much legislation important to kids, including, and to your point, Carrie, legislation to advance district literacy, the science of reading. How about that? But also passing legislation that protects minors against domestic sex trafficking. How often do you hear a member of the school board really pushing forward and ensuring that their children are protected in and out of school? But lastly, she passed legislation around trauma-informed and restorative justice practices. Oftentimes, when you're dealing with minority children, there's a sort of a propensity to want to push forward and be so punitive in a lot of ways. But we know what's working. And so we want to recognize a great sister, Erica Mitchell, there in Atlanta. We're so proud of you, sister, what you're doing. And we'll continue to recognize those around the country who are doing the right thing. We don't want to just sort of highlight those who aren't doing the right thing. We want to recognize those who are doing the right thing so we can, get more folks doing the right thing, Carrie. I don't know how to say it.
Yeah. And I'm going to give an honorable mention this week to Senator Josh Hawley of Missouri. I know. I'm putting a Republican out there. That's okay. Listen, I will recognize good work and give credit where credit is due. He has been a leader on the AI chatbot legislation to try to protect kids. Came out, we're in conversation about endorsing his legislation right now with his office, but it is tremendous to see people like this is a piece of the puzzle. Like we got to push forward with the Kids Online Safety Act, protecting kids around social media and the algorithm and all those things. This issue around AI is going to be bigger and bigger and bigger. This is the first piece of what we need to address to try to keep kids safe. But really appreciate his leadership. And, we can row in the same direction sometimes. It doesn't always have to be a fight.
No, this is what we hear. Again, we want to recognize those in education, bipartisan views on education for kids, particularly kids who in many ways are not getting what they need. And so, again, thank you all for joining us for our 14th episode of the Union Podcast. We had an amazing guest from the great state of New Jersey, Laura Walters. And any final words before we tap out of here, Carrie?
Happy birthday, Tafshir. I love you, girl.
Thank you all so much. Like, share, comment. We'll see you all next week on the Union Podcast.